So, I've been recommended this video a couple of times by a handful of people, and I figured it'd be fun maybe for us to watch it on stream and give a little bit of commentary to it. I know a little bit about some of the stuff that is talked about in this video, but there's probably some stuff that I don't know, so that'll be interesting for everyone here. So, it's called The Making of Castlevania Symphony of the Night and Dracula X by, what is it, Stray Fox is maybe how you say that, but nonetheless, let's get into it. I've heard it's very good. Like, it's a very good documentary, so I'm excited to check it out.
In the middle of the 16-bit generation, a Castlevania game hit the market that passed by most international players, but would ultimately serve as an important foundation for the series' new direction. When director Toru Hagihara started development on this important title, the focus of the series was still on Simon Belmont. The 16-bit entries that had hit the market or were in production at that point were all retelling his original adventure.
Yeah.
Hagihara strayed from these conventions under the new title Akumajo Dracula X, Rondo of Blood.
I don't know much about Rondo of Blood, actually.
Coming
I've never
fresh
even
from directing
finished
the
playing
second
it.
Castlevania for the Game Boy, Hagihara assembled a crew and started conceptualizing their new game to appear on NEC's PC Engine console. They naturally chose the CD-ROM format, as it had become the leading storage media for the PC Engine in 1992.
Okay.
Their new lead character, Richter Belmont, would inherit the series' classic control scheme, but with a few extra flourishes. The new backflip allowed him to quickly evade the various thrust attacks. Richter could also unleash a devastating special attack in return for a portion of hearts. Thanks to the new swap system, accidentally replacing your sub-weapon was a thing of the past.
It's pretty worth it as long as you're not allergic to Castlevania boss
The most
fights.
substantial change came in the form of a new and
No, wait, I've
unlikely
played Rondo of
vampire
Blood. What am I
hunter,
talking
the
about?
12-year-old girl, Maria Renard.
No, I played Rondo of Blood. I played the remake for Dracula X Chronicles. Duh. I just forgot about it. Me and classic Castlevanias don't get along too well. You and Daigon talked about it? Okay, cool. I'll
Being an
message
offshoot
you
to the main
later then.
series, the developers had a great deal of freedom to explore a different tone. Out of three
Different tone, you
conceptualized
say?
extra playable characters, Maria was the one that remained when the game entered production. She had animal friends and her magical powers to slay Dracula's minions. With her double jump and responsive controls, she was a creative way of including an easy mode. The player could unlock her in the second stage, which was designed in such a way that they would naturally discover how to free her. Maria's vastly different moves and attacks actually resulted in many headaches for the team, as they ran into bugs and glitches frequently.
What? Glitches in a
Besides taking on the
Castlevania
role of
game?
director, Toru Hagihara was
never
also
happened.
responsible for the main programming and managed the schedule during the entire development. He had a playful sense of humor, which was reflected in the game's overall lighter tone.
That's one way to put it.
The art team decided to depart from the look of the preceding 16-bit releases in the franchise, adding
they went with
anime-style
anime.
cutscenes and making use of a more saturated color palette. As the oldest console of its generation, the PC Engine still packed quite a punch. Like the Mega Drive, it used a 9-bit notation to define its colors, 3 bits per color channel, making for a total number of 512 unique colors the system could produce. Where it set itself apart from Sega's console was the sheer number of palettes developers could fill with those 512 colors. With 32 palettes available for on-screen artwork, sprites and background tiles could more easily have their own dedicated 16-color palette. The console's video chip only supported a single background plane, but this limitation was worked around in the game using all the tricks in the book.
Dude, the editing here is insane. I will just say, if this guy edits his own stuff, holy crap, this is really good.
The focus of the Konami team was on their home market, since the PC Engine console had failed to replicate its success internationally. In some regards, this gave the art team greater freedom when designing monsters, as nudity and religious symbols were still highly censored in the West at that point.
I'm gonna get demonetized.
Was a sprite artist,
Wow,
talented
okay.
in the field of animation. He was able to push the quality up a notch, a fine example being Maria's fluid run cycle. In addition, all bosses had their own unique entry animation. Implementing the enemy attack patterns was the job of a young programmer who happened to be an avid gamer himself. In his enthusiasm, he'd given them aggressive attack patterns that had to be toned down. For instance, the bosses had a desperation attack that could initially kill the player. The move remained in the final build, but was no longer lethal. Boss battles remained challenging, but the programmers had to demonstrate to the rest of the team that they were beatable without taking a hit. For
That
the
started
game's
in this
cutscenes,
game?
the art department inside Konami delivered
Is that true? I thought that was a SotN thing, but they actually did that for this game too? They made the programmers beat the bosses without taking damage?
paintings
Interesting.
and hand-drawn character frames.
Because I know that was a thing
They
in
were
SotN.
subsequently digitized and adapted to the console limitations. Shots were further animated with the stock background and sprite functionality of the console.
There are boss demos in the opening menu. Oh,
One of
okay,
the
cool.
staples of the series is without any doubt its standout soundtrack. By this point, compositions like Vampire Killer, The Beginning, and Bloody Tears were already regarded as quintessential tracks and would be arranged for Rondo of Blood. Akira Soji was in charge of the music and sound effects and composed the new signature track, Divine Bloodlines.
This song does indeed slap. The soundtrack in Rondo of Blood has always been good, yeah.
Furukawa, founder of Konami's famed in-house band, was brought in to lend his guitar skills to this opening track. Akira
Why does
assigned
Richter have a
3
guitar
fellow
in that
Konami
artwork?
composers to the project. Together, they delivered a rich blend of arrangements and new tracks that would have a lasting impact on the franchise, not least of which being the prayer for the file selection screen.
Yeah. Wait, is this?
Dracula, der Fürst der Finsternis, Herr
Oh, they
des
reused this in
Teufels
Circle of the Moon.
Schusses,
Okay.
ist auferstanden.
The
Yeah,
German
yeah.
language happened to be of interest to Akira, and he thought it would
Yeah.
be fitting for the game's introduction. In addition, Richter was named after a German conductor. Dialogue for the game's cutscenes was recorded in a professional recording studio by trained voice talent.
I need to watch the cutscenes in
Casting
this
the right
game.
talent for
The
both
English cutscenes
cutscenes
are
and the in-game
very good.
samples was quite the challenge. The audio team listened meticulously to sample CDs provided by casting agencies to find the fitting talent. For the in-game samples, Akira mostly relied on his friends and Konami employees. He ultimately found the right candidates in 2 new recruits to the audio team and a salaryman. A conference room was converted to a temporary recording studio where the Konami employees would deliver the monster screams for the game. Puzzled by the strange noises coming from the room, a curious receptionist came through at one point to see what on earth was going on. Akumajo Dracula X Rondo of Blood would be packed with secrets and Easter eggs and showcase the attention to detail expected from a top Konami product. Using the massive storage capacity available, they realized their concept to greatly expand replayability. During a typical first run through the game, the player would only experience half of what it would have to offer. By including a clear percentage at the file selection screen, they would be encouraged to find the alternative stages and rescue the trapped villagers.
I knew that aspect of the
All
game.
changes,
Yeah.
both large and small, resulted in a fresh take within the expected Castlevania game structure. The effort by the developers was commended as it became one of the most beloved games in the series.
Beloved games.
Shortly after its release, rumors of Castlevania 5 for the Super Nintendo started to surface in the media. It would ultimately hit the market as an adaptation of Rondo of Blood in 1995, handled by a separate development team.
Yeah,
By
I heard this
point,
one's
the
ass.
bar for console graphics had been raised significantly. The team at Konami went for a hand-drawn style for the backdrops, but in return had to scale down on the amount of content
It's cult
in the
status
game.
at least.
Despite this
Interesting, yeah.
shortcoming and the slow gameplay, it turned out to be a solid but commercially failing adaptation.
Yeah, the ass one's the SNES game. Gotcha.
While Rondo of Blood was in development,
just-
the Mega Drive team had followed their own vision, loosely tying the series to the Bram Stoker novel.
I do need
Each
to
of the
play
16-bit console
Bloodlines.
entries was helmed by a different director and had some overlap in development, leading to 3 unique installments.
I should play both Rondo and
Programmer
Bloodlines,
Koji
actually.
Igarashi was eager to get actively involved in the franchise himself. As a fan of the series, he hung out with the Rondo of Blood team in his after hours and helped with debugging. After delivering a highly successful dating sim, he expressed
Highly
his interest in being assigned to a follow-up to the Mega Drive.
I should also play the
For
highly
remainder of
successful dating sim.
1994, a small team conceptualized this new chapter to appear on Sega's 32X add-on. Meanwhile, gaming
There's
was
an
gearing
English
up for the
patch
next
somewhere, I'm
generation.
sure.
Many contenders were fighting for their own piece of the market. At the start of 1994, Konami had already signed up as a third-party developer for Sony's anticipated machine. Konami's extensive R&D division was hard at work on tools and code libraries. The company had a multi-platform strategy, porting games to a range of systems. Tools and contracts for the PlayStation were finished first, and thus Konami's initial next-gen games would be built around its hardware. Over at the 32X Castlevania team, the project went through major changes. It shifted from a tie-in to the Mega Drive entry to a continuation of Rondo of Blood. The target platform would also change, as the 32X project was cancelled but reignited for the PlayStation.
Interesting.
Scenario writer and programmer Koji Igarashi remained involved and joined with Akumajo Dracula X director Toru Hagihara. Helped by the core team of
that would have
PC
been
Engine
very
release,
funny
they proposed a game plan that would
if you
take
got
the
him
Dracula
to
X
sign your
series even
Tokameka
further
Memorial.
from the established formula.
Copy instead of SotN. That would have been gold.
Rondo of Blood already had a sprinkling of exploration elements, but in the sequel, those would take center stage. Most of the sprinkling of
So
exploration
this is how I know
elements,
this footage
but in
was
the
faked, is because he got through the mist gate on the first try.
sequel, those would take center stage. Most of the team
That takes at
members were
least
fans
7
of the
tries for most
action-adventure
people.
genre, especially The Legend of Zelda. The adventure style fit with the desire to break from the challenging gameplay and allow players of all skill levels to have an enjoyable and lengthy experience.
What version is he playing this
However,
on?
management questioned if the fan base would be accepting of such dramatic change. Super Castlevania 4 had been the last commercial mega hit. Over the years,
That transformation
the brand was
looks like
starting to
PlayStation
rely on
version.
its
I think he's
strong
playing the
fan base.
PlayStation version.
It was in Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, that the developers found some reassurance.
That was
This
the
feature
15th save
title
state
had already
take.
proven
Nice,
that
yeah.
there was once an audience accepting of an exploration-focused entry into the franchise, and thus helped to convince management of their idea. The next substantial change to the game would be the protagonist. Igarashi had explored various storylines while working on the 32X project. One idea that had survived was to swap the role of the Belmonts by turning them into an adversary.
Adversary?
They felt that, in contrast to the muscled, whip-wielding Belmonts, a more elegant figure should take the lead, preferably a vampire. It would be ideal for the adventure gameplay, as being able to use a wide array of weapons and powers would make the upgrade journey more exciting for the player. The perfect
Smart
candidate
move.
was a side character from Castlevania 3, Alucard. Being the
Not
son
a
of the
Belmont.
human, Lisa, and Prince of Darkness, Dracula, Alucard could harness the powers of light and dark. He could therefore wield holy sub-weapons like the Belmonts, but also use the power of darkness for magic attacks, and to transform into creatures of the night. This appealed to the development team as they explored the idea for an alignment system in the game, whereby the ending would depend
Dude,
on usage
what
of
level
dark
is
or
this
light
guy?
effects in a playthrough.
674
The character
HP?
Alucard would make for a more dramatic story, in which the tragic hero must confront his father.
Dang, he's grinding his familiars or something.
The 1992 blockbuster Bram Stoker's Dracula was the inspiration to add more depth to the personality of Dracula. The film showed the strong bond to his wife, and her death being the catalyst for his hatred towards humanity.
So he
The new
really did just rip
Castlevania
off
would
Bram
take
Stoker's
these
Dracula.
story
Okay,
cues
gotcha.
and pick up the storyline 5 years after the events of Dracula X. Maria Renard set
How
out to
desperate
search
are you
for
to
the
kill?
missing Richter Belmont,
Yeah.
while Alucard mysteriously awoke from his supposed eternal slumber.
You ever just soft lock on your way to the start of the
With the
castle?
core goals
I know I
outlined,
have.
A small group of programmers and artists
Literally
started
today.
production on this extensive game. They were part of CS5, one of the 6 divisions inside Konami Tokyo. They thought their concept lent itself best to traditional 2D gameplay, taking into account the limited knowledge of 3D on their team and the huge number of enemies planned. The original Dracula X could therefore serve as a strong foundation for the crew, not least for the gameplay. Project leads Hagihara and Igarashi would do a substantial amount of the coding. The PlayStation hardware was designed for 3D gameplay first and foremost. Gone was the traditional hardware support to scroll 2D background planes. Developers of traditional 2D games would mostly rely on the console's ability to draw 2D flat rectangles outside the 3D system. Symphony of the Night, however, used a mixture of 2D and 3D primitives.
Yup.
All the 3D objects on the PlayStation are made up of 3-sided polygons.
Isn't
The
that just
console had a special
3D in
function
general?
to position 2 polygons next to each other and so form a quad. These were textured to display characters and objects for Castlevania.
Yep.
Since they were part of the 3D system, they could fully use the rotation and scale functionality in addition to transparency effects. Aside from quads, they also used the rectangle primitive for various particle effects.
Yep.
The PlayStation's GPU could draw a 2D shape much faster than polygons, although they lacked any 3D functionality.
And then there's
As
the
for the
Saturn.
background, the programmers
Well, we'll
emulated
get to
the
that.
tile system from the 16-bit generation, placing 16x16 flat rectangles in a grid. Quads were used to enrich the backgrounds with objects, free from a grid system.
You
Quads
say
were
it was
further used
genius
for
of
animated
them
background
to blend
elements.
2D and 3D,
Some were placed in
but
perspective for a true 3D effect.
it makes things a lot
With
harder
this mixture of 2D
in a lot
and
of weird
3D
ways.
elements, the areas didn't really exist as a complete 3D environment. Their depth was simply created by the order that rectangles or polygons were sent to the GPU to render. The resourcefulness of the programmers really came to the fore.
Resourcefulness.
For example,
Okay, he's
during
definitely
the
playing on
second phase
emulator.
of the prologue battle scene, the background composed
I've already
of
seen
2D
two
rectangles
emulator-specific,
is replaced
visual
with a
bugs.
background made of quads that could be fully rotated.
He's probably
To
playing
hide the
on
transition,
what is
they
it,
implemented a little
PCXE
shake
or
effect.
something?
Although the engine ended up using more CPU power than they anticipated, the clever optimized coding resulted in a smooth engine that could display a large number of objects on
Smooth?
screen at once. The enemy Granfaloon was designed as a showcase to display its potential.
Smooth, you say? Have you ever used a mana prism in this game before? Or any potion and
While
then
Koji
transformed?
Igarashi wrote the storyline, character designer Furukawa was responsible
I know,
for
smooth for
dialogue.
1997,
Key scenes were
whatever,
storyboarded, and the layout
whatever.
of the entire castle was sketched beforehand. In order
Take
to
everything I
test
say
the
with a grain
layout
of salt,
while the
okay?
pixel
I
art
was
still in
literally
development, they made
basically
use of
born.
placeholder blocks. To boost performance, the game runs in a low resolution and uses a low bit depth color mode. This allowed the developers to maximize the amount of artwork that could be stored in the video memory. In the low color modes, the tile sets simply link to palettes, like they did in the previous console generations. However, each tile set could have their own palette that could be filled from millions of colors. Backgrounds could therefore have a rich textured look and use colors that a console like the PC Engine simply could not display.
Unless you load in the load zone from an area you're not supposed to. Then things get a little
Another neat feature
weird.
of the PlayStation was to shift
I don't know,
the
use a
brightness of
toadstool in a
tiles freely
corner,
across the
clip through the
screen
floor.
to replicate shading effects without any additional memory usage. As the artist worked on the pixel art,
Wait, what do you say about the
room's
shading
stuck
effects? I'm
buttons
actually
to shift
interested.
The brightness simply could not display. Another neat feature of the PlayStation was to shift the brightness of tiles freely across the screen to replicate shading effects without any additional memory usage.
That's interesting.
As the artist worked on the pixel art, the rooms started to become alive in their minds. With the game's concept solidified early on, individual members had a great deal of freedom to shape their work and implement all kinds of details and secrets. Toru Hagihara himself also added
What a secret.
all kinds of details and secrets.
Cow.
Toru Hagihara himself also added his ideas to bring the castle to life. He was also able to cleverly hide most of the loading interruptions with a special hallway. In this room, the music stream
You guys know what the CD in the hallway stands for, right?
stops, and thus new texture pages could be loaded from disk while the player passes through the hallway. The extensive castle required a cast of enemies far beyond the number of the previous entries. Luckily,
Stands
they
for
were able to
CD's
transfer the
nuts.
majority
Ha,
of
got
enemies
him.
from Rondo of Blood pixel perfectly, as they chose to use the same resolution for characters. The animator
Yeah, it's
responsible
Count
for these
Dracula,
original
you're so
sprites
right.
continued his involvement, making it easier to keep a consistent style among enemies and add additional animation frames. The animator also managed to portray Alucard's elegance through his smooth run cycle.
Dude, the
game also managed.
they love to show off. I can't believe they made bird watching a Chivo. Yeah, I know, that's funny. They love to talk about Alucard's walk animation in this game. And then as speedrunners, we're like, backdash is faster though. I imagine that makes them so mad. The animators spent like years of their lives, years of
ranging from
man hours.
mythological monsters to characters from The Wizard of Oz. All the crew's effort led to some playable areas by the end of 1995. After this kickstart, some staff members had to temporarily abandon the project to focus on other matters, leaving the artist to continue independently. It was therefore uncertain if the project would be ready for the announced summer of 1996 deadline. With the new Protagonist came the desire to break from the visual style of characters from the preceding games. To broaden their horizons,
True,
the
just
crew
make the
started
walk cycle
browsing
faster.
bookstores and researching the artists behind the covers that seemed fitting for their game.
What can I do for you?
Out of the candidates, they picked Ayami Kojima,
What?
a freelance manga illustrator in the horror action genre. Her distinct style of blending beauty, darkness, and elegance matched the new look that they were aiming for. Ayami Kojima had her own personal process, using a variety of tools and techniques.
This artwork
After
is
the
iconic
initial
at this
discussion
point,
of the
though.
character
That was a
traits
good
with the
decision.
directors, she would make sketches using Conte crayons and define darker shadows with Indian ink. A signature style is the usage of modeling paste applied with a palette knife to create texture. Color was an important aspect for discussion. Each character has a strikingly different key color, according to their personality. After applying acrylic paints for the base colors, the artwork would still undergo numerous touch-ups, from emphasizing highlights and applying metallic paints to smudging the paint for soft gradients and glows. While the cover art for previous
Is anybody
titles
following
often
any of
had
this?
to be
I'm not
delivered in a
a
matter
art
of
guy.
days, Ayami Kojima was involved at a much earlier stage of production, which fit her dedicated method and pacing to set the new style for the series. The finished work greatly helped to shape the characters in the minds of players and added a more mature look compared to its predecessor.
This song. This song, dude. It's just so...
Kojima's art
Why?
style and the richly detailed backgrounds set an unmatched atmosphere for the game. Composer Michiru Yamane
The art went a
would
long
further
way,
enhance
for
it
sure.
with a
No, that
stellar
artwork is
soundtrack.
amazing.
Like the other artists involved, the directors gave her a great deal of freedom. The visuals would be a driving factor for the musical genre of a given stage. The score incorporates a diversity of elements from rock to jazz to orchestral music. Igarashi in particular was open to the different styles that had not yet been incorporated into the series. Most of the compositions were done in audio software packages like Logic and
Yeah.
Pro Tools to create the orchestral instrumental sound.
Yeah, a lot of
A
the
traditional trained
vocal
singer
sounds
and two guitarists were
very
brought on
identical,
board
yeah.
to further deepen the score. The guitar-driven track Wandering Ghost is a fine example.
This is another good song. Yeah, the soundtrack's amazing.
When the compact disc formats like CD digital audio and CDI were first defined, their specifications were published in color-coded books. Red Book, being the standard for regular audio CDs, was used to store the music for the first Dracula X game. The PlayStation supported the compressed XA audio format, first defined in the Green Book that specified CDI. Using this compressed format extended the amount of music that could be stored on the disc. The hardware had integrated support to stream and decompress it in real time. In a few instances, game data had to be loaded from disk, and thus the music couldn't be streamed. In those cases, the music was synthesized by the PlayStation's sound chip using samples loaded in the audio RAM.
AKA this song. Yep.
To ready themselves for the new generation of multimedia gaming, Konami brought on Rika Muranaka, a bilingual young producer with many connections in the US recording industry, and thus perfect for Konami's desire to add songs with international appeal. Her first job was to produce a pop ballad for Castlevania's ending credits. Muranaka flew over to LA and met up with lyricist Tony Haynes. Together, they wrote the pop soul ballad I Am the Wind, mixed at Capitol Recording Studio in
International
Los Angeles,
appeal.
featuring the
Nailed
talents of
it.
renowned jazz musicians like Gerald Albright.
What a
For the
legend.
vocalist, Muranaka turned to one of her friends, Cynthia Harrell, whose voice she deemed fitting for the song.
Very good song,
I
yeah.
Am the Wind was a humble beginning to Muranaka's influence in bringing an international sound to Konami's biggest franchises. Years later, she would call again upon the talents of Cynthia Harrell for the James Bond-esque Snake Eater theme.
James Bond-esque. I guess that's one way to put it, yeah. Yeah, she also did Snake Eater. Let the guy
dawn of
finish.
32-bit
He was just talking
generation,
about it.
CGI was no longer only for a small group of pioneering companies. It was to be expected from game developers to include some form of multimedia in their projects for a contemporary feel. Up until this point, the senior artist inside Konami Tokyo had little to no experience with 3D and video editing packages. It was an opportunity for young arts graduates to enter the field and quickly rise through the ranks. Metal Gear
Damn,
Solid
I bet
3
in
cinematic
1997
producer
these
Ken
3D
Himazumi
animations
had
hit
his humble
really
start
hard.
with the cutscenes for Symphony of the Night.
I still
He was
like
involved
these
in the cinematics for most early PS1
these,
releases
cinematics,
and worked
yeah.
in a separate department. As 1996 rolled on, Dracula's castle started to be fully implemented, and dialogue was recorded.
Like every
The new
PlayStation
build
1
was
game, if
showcased
you
on a
boot it
promo
up,
VHS
like if you boot up any PlayStation 1 game, and it's one of my favorite things to do is just play through random PlayStation 1 games and just wait at the like start screen, there's going to be an FMV that plays, and it's going to be like 5 minutes long, and it's very clear that that's where all the budget went for the entire game, is just to have full motion video, like intro, that they could use for like their commercial or something like that, and then the rest of the game is trash.
Tape, along with the
But
first
SotN
footage of a
actually
completely different
didn't do that.
Castlevania for the N64.
Well, I guess they kind of
developed
did
in
it,
Kobe.
but also remember,
Toru Hag-
fun story. I played Castlevania 64 for the first time ever this last week while I was on vacation. Somebody brought a N64 EverDrive. So I was like, I feel like I should play Castlevania 64. I played for 5 minutes, got lost, and never played it again.
Agihara,
It was
now
bad.
head of Konami's CS5 division, handed over the reins to Koji Igarashi, who would continue with a core group of 8. It had been the developer's intent to have the player beat the game first by defeating Richter Belmont. Death's encounter early on was a scene to place question
Some
marks
people
in
think you
player's
beat the
head,
game when you
as
kill
both
Richter,
this evil
yes.
servant and the equipment he took from Alucard were hidden deep within the game. In their search to add more content for the players, they came up with the idea to add a reversed castle. The team was able to secure some more development time to implement it, pushing the release to 1997. After being in development for almost 2.5
Dude, if this game was only
years,
the first
several
castle,
artists joined for the final stretch of production.
it would feel so
The schedule
empty.
remained intense, with some people still at work on New Year's Eve. The game code ballooned, to the point that it took an hour to compile a new build, which led
That doesn't surprise me that the game code ballooned, as they said.
to
That does
further
not surprise me.
hardships. During the final weeks, they had to decide which, from the list of suggested features, to implement. An idea to include Alucard's room and have the player decorate it throughout the game was abandoned, and so was the idea to include more characters like Elizabeth Bartley. However,
sorry,
Familiars
who?
and the cutscene with Alucard's mother was successfully realized right before the deadline.
This was
One thing
added
that
last
slipped through
minute?
production was the temp designs of the game's menus. They
Huh.
forgot to give them a proper design treatment, and thus the menus created by the programmer ended up in the final product.
Wait. So this is just like the placeholder menu? She's in Bloodlines? Okay, cool. Wait, this is the placeholder menu? I guess that makes sense now that I'm looking at it. But it just doesn't... Wow.
While in the middle of such a hectic work schedule,
I guess
the team had no
it's
sense
just
of
been
how all
imprinted
their
in my
changes to
brain
the
that that's the
franchise would
normal
ultimately be
menu,
received
so...
by the fans. After delivering the final build for the Japanese market, they took some well-deserved time off. Meanwhile,
Wait. Then who made the...
management had decided to push its international launch forward. What followed was a big rush to have it revoiced and translated for the Western release. Upon its launch, Symphony
then
of
who
the Night
patched
was
the game?
surrounded by the latest 3D spectacle. Nevertheless, players around the world embraced its more traditional gameplay.
I guess he just skipped over the fact that they needed to patch the game. Because 1.0 is broken as fuck.
Welcomed the new direction. It went on to become a commercial hit in most markets, matching the success of the first Castlevania. On top of that, the charged manufacturing and royalty cost for a PlayStation disc were considerably lower than that of a typical Nintendo cartridge.
True.
In line with Konami's multi-platform strategy,
Look at
a
it.
SotN port would ultimately hit the market as well.
Look at
developed by their
2
Nagoya
FPS.
office, who did their best to adapt the engine designed for the PlayStation to the complex architecture of the Saturn.
Complex is one way to put it.
The 32-bit generation was a true turning point in gaming history, and so was Symphony of the Night in many ways. While designed as an offshoot to the main series,
Yeah, I like the
Symphony
other
of the
menu
Night
style a
would
little bit
spawn
better,
range of similarly structured games, and so became the leading template for Castlevania.
Also, is it really fair to put Lament of Innocence and Curse of Darkness in the same vein as the rest of these games?
Night in many ways.
Is it really
While
fair?
designed as an
I
offshoot
feel like
of the
that's a
main
stretch.
series,
Yo, what's
Symphony
up,
of the Night
Serial?
would
Thank you.
spawn a range of
2 of these things are not like the others.
similarly structured games, and so became the
Curse
leading
kind of deserves
template
it.
for
I still need to
Castlevania.
play through it again.
For the two main artists,
I know
of the
Lament of
Dracula
Innocence
X
is like
games,
super
it had
different.
been one of the final projects before leaving the games industry entirely, as pixel art started to fall out of fashion. In contrast, for crew members involved in the multimedia aspect, art started to fall out of fashion.
What emulator is he playing on?
In contrast, for crew members involved
should have
in the
lagged like
multimedia
crazy.
aspect,
All right,
it had been
whatever.
a boost to their career. Symphony of the Night marked a moment in gaming history where some of the greatest talents in programming, art, and music came together and were granted the time and freedom to make their extensive state-of-the-art 2D game in a 3D market. Decades later, their effort would keep inspiring a whole new generation of game developers, and so it not only became a significant game for the series, but for the whole 2D action-adventure genre.
True. Very true. Nice. Wow. Great video, guys. Great video. Please check out the original by Stray Fox. And yeah, that was fun. Good times. Feel like there wasn't like too much stuff other than like the actual like nitty-gritty like stuff talking about the code and how things were like done, I guess. That stuff was new to me, but other than that, really fun video. Like that.